They told you to go to therapy. They told you healing meant talking it out, naming your pain, unpacking your childhood, rewriting your story. And you did. You cried. You journaled. You meditated. You unpacked and processed and peeled back layers you didn't even know existed. But something feels off, doesn't it? You're not free. You're just more articulate in your prison, more self-aware in your suffering, more fluent in the language of pain, but still enslaved by it. What if I told you that most therapy doesn't heal you? It domesticates you? Polishing the cage. Carl Jung didn't see therapy as comfort. He saw it as confrontation. The psyche is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a battlefield. And most therapy today isn't preparing you for war. It's giving you a vocabulary for retreat. You're not healing. You're learning how to behave inside the trauma. You're being taught to regulate your emotions, not to understand what birthed them, to identify your triggers, not to dismantle them, to cope, not to transform. And worse, you've started to confuse insight with growth. You think that because you understand your pain, you've conquered it. But knowledge is not power. Power is power. And power doesn't come from analysis. It comes from integration. You're not a spreadsheet. You're a soul on fire. And they keep trying to put that fire out, becoming someone else. It's about finally becoming yourself. The self you've spent your whole life avoiding. And when you do that, you won't need a couch. You won't need a diagnosis. You won't need someone to tell you how you feel. You'll just know. Because you've met the deepest parts of yourself. And welcome them home. They told you healing was a finish line. A box to check. A state of mind you eventually arrive at after enough sessions, enough insight, enough workbooks filled with processed emotions. But healing, true healing, isn't a destination. It's a death. The death of who you thought you had to be. The death of the persona you built to survive. The death of the you who kept everything together, just so you wouldn't fall apart. It's not gentle. It doesn't come with incense and affirmations. It comes like fire. It burns the scaffolding you've clung to your whole life. The mask, the narrative, the coping mechanisms. Gone. Because real healing isn't about making the pain go away. It's about letting it transform you. Letting it break your shell, so the thing inside can finally breathe. But most therapy isn't about death. It's about safety, stability, continuity. It wants you to keep functioning, even if functioning means pretending. But the soul wasn't made to function. It was made to evolve. And evolution begins where performance dies. The myth of the healed self. Modern psychology sells you a myth. The myth of the fully healed, emotionally regulated, always grounded person who never gets triggered, never falls apart, never spirals. But that person doesn't exist. Carl Jung said the goal is not to be good, but to be whole. And being whole means sometimes you're a storm. Sometimes you're a mess. Sometimes you're deeply irrational, beautifully human, painfully alive. And that's not failure. That's presence. But therapy, as it's often practiced, tries to flatten that range. It tries to tame the chaos, blunt the edges, normalize the extremes. And in doing so, it kills the very thing that makes you real. You weren't meant to be neat. You were meant to be honest, raw, unapologetically complex. You don't need to be healed. You need to be integrated. You need to know that your rage has a voice, that your sadness has a reason, that your confusion is sacred. Not all wounds are meant to heal. And here's where the whole idea of healing shatters. What if some wounds aren't meant to go away? What if they are not meant to be healed, but to be carried as sacred scars? Scars that remind you where you've been. Scars that give you the authority to speak truth in a world drowning in lies. Not every trauma is a curse. Some are initiations, dark rites of passage that break your illusions, so that something deeper can finally emerge. And those can't be talked out. They must be lived through. But modern therapy wants tidy resolutions. It wants measurable outcomes. It wants closure. But your soul? It wants transcendence. And that comes not from answers, but from the courage to sit inside the questions. You were never broken, just buried. So what do? If therapy isn't the path, what is? You go inward. You get brutally honest. You stop outsourcing your healing to professionals who've never faced their own fire. You stop trying to be better, and you start trying to be real. You sit with the discomfort. You stop managing your shadow and start making art from it. You stop trying to return to who you were before the pain and start becoming who you were meant to be because of it. Because maybe you were never meant to be fixed. Maybe you were meant to be forged, not into a version of yourself that's safe, but into one that's sovereign, one that doesn't need permission to feel, one that doesn't need labels to be understood, one that doesn't need a therapist to say, "You're okay now," because you know you are. Not because you're no longer in pain, but because the pain no longer owns you. You became the mirror. You became the priest. You became the damn fire itself. And that is healing. You don't become whole by being understood. You become whole by understanding yourself so deeply, no one else's version of you can survive. You are not meant to be fixed. You walk into therapy thinking you're broken, that something is wrong with you, that you need to be fixed. But what if that assumption, that core belief, is the real illness? Jung said that neurosis is not a sign of weakness, but of a soul that refuses to settle. Your sadness? It might be the last honest part of you. Your confusion? It might be the beginning of wisdom. But therapy, the way it's done today, doesn't teach you to trust those parts. It teaches you to pathologize them, to silence them with diagnosis, to treat every divergence from normal as a problem to be managed. They don't want you healed. They want you predictable. And predictability is not the same as peace. Integration over elimination. Here's the fundamental flaw in the model. It teaches you to eliminate pain. But pain is not your enemy. It's your compass. Your darkness is not a glitch in your programming. It is the map to your liberation. Jung never said, "Conquer the shadow." He said, "Integrate it. Bring it into the light. Give it a name, a voice, a seat at your inner table." Instead of asking, "How do I stop feeling this way?" ask, "What is this feeling trying to wake me up to?" But modern therapy rarely goes there. It's so focused on symptom management. You never even get the chance to meet the version of you hidden beneath the suffering. And that version? That's who you came here to become. The wild soul can't be coached. Some souls were never meant to be soothed. They were meant to be set on fire. You feel it, don't you? That quiet rebellion in your gut. That part of you that wants to scream when someone tells you to just breathe and let it pass. You don't want to let it pass. You want to understand why it came. Because you are not a project, not a diagnosis, not a collection of symptoms waiting to be managed. You are a storm, a fire, a myth in motion, and no worksheet can hold that. No couch can contain it. No credential can define it. Shadow work or script reading. Jung warned of this. He knew that if therapy became institutionalized, it would lose its soul. And that's exactly what happened. Now therapists follow scripts, session plans, insurance codes, manuals that reduce your depth to bullet points. And shadow work, real shadow work, has nothing to do with worksheets. It's not safe. It's not pretty. It's not something you can do with lo-fi beats in the background. It's bloody. It's gut-wrenching. It's the psychological equivalent of dismembering who you think you are, just to find out who you really are. And most therapy doesn't take you there, because most therapists have never gone there themselves. You're not being led out of the woods. You're being told to build a cabin inside them. The archetype of the wounded healer. There is a figure from mythology called the wounded healer. This is who Jung believed a real therapist should be. Someone who has journeyed through their own hell and returned with wisdom, not just training. But now, anyone with a degree can call themselves a healer. And some of them have never faced their own darkness, never integrated their own shadow, never stared into the abyss long enough for it to blink back. So they become parrots of the system, not guides through the fire. And that's the difference between true healing and behavioral training. Healing isn't sanity. It's sovereignty. You think healing means becoming normal, balanced, productive. No outbursts, no spirals, no dark nights of the soul. But healing isn't about normal. It's about truth. And truth, by its nature, is often brutal, chaotic, and uncomfortable. Let me ask you, what if your panic attacks are sacred? What if your depression is a protest? What if your rage is a demand for boundaries the world keeps violating? The modern model calls these disorders. Jung called them messages from the unconscious. Your psyche isn't broken. It's breaking open. And instead of listening, you're being taught to perform wellness, to check the boxes, to smile politely, to keep showing up even when your soul is on strike. You're not healing. You're dissociating more beautifully. The economy of suffering. Here's what no one tells you. There is an entire economy built around your dysfunction. You are more profitable sick than whole, more manageable medicated than dangerous, more useful compliant than wild. They don't want you liberated. They want you digestible. So therapy becomes the lubricant in the gears of a broken system, not the escape hatch. You walk into those offices thinking you're reclaiming yourself, but you're being polished, refined, civilized. And civilized people don't start revolutions. They write gratitude journals. The therapist as priest. In the old world, you went to a priest to confess your sins. Now you go to a therapist to confess your pain. But the structure is the same. You sit, you speak, you hand your soul to someone wearing credentials, and you wait for them to tell you what it means. But Jung hated this model. He believed the therapist was not a priest, but a mirror, and that mirror should reflect your darkness, not manage your symptoms. Yet in today's world, therapy has become a morality factory. You're not being understood. You're being normalized. You're being reshaped to fit into a sick society. You're learning how to function in dysfunction. They call that healing. But it's not healing. It's compliance. The pathologization of depth. Modern therapy is obsessed with symptoms, with tidiness, with diagnosis. Grief becomes depression. Anger becomes aggression. Existential despair becomes a serotonin imbalance. They don't ask, what does your darkness mean? They ask, how can we manage it? But the soul does not want to be managed. It wants to be seen. It wants to be heard. It wants to be witnessed in its entirety, not compartmentalized into a DSM checklist. And this is the tragedy. You are not sick. You are deep. And no one taught you how to carry the weight of your own soul. They just taught you to sedate it.